I think that my absolute love affair with film, with cinema, is the most important influence on me. I was enthralled at a young age, and when I got to college, it sort of blossomed. I discovered Godard and Herzog and the German New Wave, and really saw in their work a kind of complexity I'd never encountered. You know, I grew up in the era of conceptual art, and I think that the conceptualization of features and understanding later the power of mise-en-scène, what it could mean implicitly to meaning, was really important to me. I was always interested in spatial relations and their implications on bodies, and designing a conceptual product that unfolded over time. And together with architecture and sculpture and color, those things are at the core of what my interests are, and I return to them constantly. When I took Memento, the first thing Chris said to me was, I want you to design the tattoos, which would actually usually be the domain of the makeup artist, but he wanted me to do it, thinking of them as certainly a map of his history, of the duration of his travels, and yet they mostly are non sequiturs and don't make any sense, except a few things to remind himself to eat and to buy film. And so they mimic his condition of not being able to form memories. It's a map of no place, which was one of the ideas about the city that it supposedly takes place and you don't really know where it is, and it was like any place, whatever. One of the other things that was so important was this map he carries around with him, where he puts the Polaroids up on, and then he folds it up and takes it with him, and then he takes it out and puts it in the hotel room. And that is the only real rendition of space in the film. The rest of it is sort of interchangeable. Oh, it's a coffee shop and it's a hotel room, and they aren't really well designed, or they aren't really memorable. They fold into one another, which was what we were trying to do. When I started it, I had an assistant who was actually one of my ex-students sneak into hotel rooms before they were made up by the maids, so that we could see what they really looked like, how the bed covers were laid, and et cetera, et cetera. And I have all these great pictures of unmade hotel rooms. When I showed them to Chris, he said, "Oh, that's much too real for my film." And so that was really interesting, because one of the first things he said to me was that he wanted to redefine realism. What that means from director to director is something that production designers have to listen and intuit as much as anything else, because they usually don't give many more details than that, and you have to sort of figure out what that means as you go along. Yeah, I want to make a blue film. I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean, I want to make a blue film? There were a lot of blue films in the 80s, and so what does it making a blue film mean now? He never told me why he wanted it to be a blue film. And quite frankly, well, we discovered that Chris is colorblind, which I think is well known now, so I'm not giving away anything. And the idea of making an all blue film, and then I want to redefine realism, those things are at odds with each other. And Wally Pfister and I decided that there should be a little bit of movement away from blue sometimes, and we introduced dark aqua, dark teal colors, and natural like wood tones. And I think that really actually helped the naturalism of it, besides the blueness of it. You know, I never used yellow at all in films, knowing, as I did from my years of teaching particularly, that it cannot be contained, and it floats off of anything you put it on, including a film frame. It just floats. It's unbounded, you know? And I couldn't manage it. And then we did the second season of Hannibal. They wanted me to design this one really big set that was like an insane asylum. And they wanted to put cages that they house crazy people in. And I wanted them to be yellow and to float in front of the frame. And the DP he was like, do they have to be that color? And I said, well, the only other color they would be silver, which is, you know, the international neutral. And then you won't see them at all. And we did some tests, and it was so much more interesting to have the grid of these cell boxes floating in front of your ability to see who's behind it on both sides than it was to have nothing there. And I think a lot of that thing is not necessarily, for me, a kind of recognizable structure as much as it is atmosphere, as much as it is producing a kind of implicit response in the audience, like what I was just describing. There were so many decisions made about Hannibal's office, which has this cantilevered catwalk in it and these articulated arches. There was an arch that fell right in the middle of the room, and I sent the drawings to the DP and to the director, and they didn't say anything about it. And I thought, is that going to make them crazy that they can't be right in the middle of the room with the camera all the time? And neither of them said anything, so I went ahead with it. And when they arrived in Toronto and looked at the set, they both said, "Can you move this pillar?" And I said, "No, now we can't move the pillar. It's too late. It's steel and it's there." And so that actually really had a lot to do with the way every scene in there was shot. You could never shoot like straight down the line, or close, in a close kind of situation you could, but not in a gigantic wide shot. And I actually think the off-centeredness of that is a really important aspect of what that character is about. I do sometimes have a lot of fun with props and objects in movies. When I did Recount, which was the telling of the 2000 election, I discovered that all of the paperwork, all of the court cases were still available online because people were obsessed with it. And I became kind of obsessed with it. And I wanted the appropriate piece of paper to be in every folder. So when the actors picked it up, in the next scene it would be a different legal document. But you could find all this stuff, and it was really this beautiful game for me of perfect realism in a certain way. And the actors actually noticed and commented on it, how great it was that they could move anywhere in the space, pick up something, look at it, and it would inform what they were actually talking about, even though they weren't necessarily prepared for it. So when I was designing the Kubrick show, it was a year of my life. I read every interview that Kubrick ever gave and really tried to be, not necessarily in his head, but to do justice to his way of thinking, and took time for each movie and wanted to put together these sort of tableaus, perceptual tableaus in the museum where the viewer could look at things and maybe understand how he thought through it. I knew intuitively that Kubrick was aware of minimalist sculpture, and I wanted to put McCracken, one of his sculptures, in the gallery near this quote of Kubrick saying that he had tried out many ideas of what the entities should be like, and he realized that it needed to be a minimalist art piece. And the curators at LACMA didn't want to lend me one of their McCrackens because they felt that it was very upsetting for it to be near props. That there would be a piece of art near movie props. But I actually said to one of the curators, the only people who confuse props and art are artists. Movie people never do.